Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcoming you all on this fine, drizzly, early March evening. My name is Ray Rice. I'm president here at the University of Maine at Presque Isle, and I'd like to welcome you all to our Libra Distinguished Lecture Series. I'm reading this from a script because I'm trying to help out the teleprompter here. So we're very pleased to host our second speaker of the semester, Maya Williams of Portland, Maine's 7th Poet Laureate of Portland, and a New England Book Award finalist for this evening's presentation, What's So Wrong with a Pity Party Anyway? Which probably a lot of us are asking that question right now. We're pleased to be able to host this as an in-person and virtual presentation. So welcome to all those on Zoom. It looks like we're up to 18 people joining us from Zoom here in the campus center and throughout the United States. Our series has given us the opportunity to present a wide range of speakers, from astronauts and journalists to scholars and adventurers to poets from our campus and community since 1999. Over the years, we've welcomed more than 100 speakers as part of this series. So we're so pleased to have Maya Williams here for a special evening that is equal parts poetry reading and writing workshop. To help set the stage for this evening's talk, I'd like to turn the time over to Dr. Deborah Hodgkins, UMPE Professor of English and a member of our Leadership and Belonging Council, to provide an official introduction. Again, welcome to tonight's Libra Distinguished Lecturer. My special thanks to Maya Williams for joining us here in the county and virtually all across the country. And thank you all for being a part of this special evening. Deborah?
Definitely shorter than Ray. Hopefully I won't repeat too much of what Ray has already shared here. Good evening. I'm Deborah Hodgkins, Professor of English and a member of both UMPE's Libra Distinguished Lecturer Committee and our Leadership and Belonging Council, who are both sponsors of this event. It is my great pleasure this evening to introduce poet Maya Williams, who's also a lovely dinner companion I have to share too. Maya is a religious, Black, multiracial, non-binary suicide survivor who is currently an Ashley Bryan Fellow and was honored to serve as the 7th Poet Laureate of Portland, Maine, as you just heard from Ray, from July 2021 to July 2024. Maya's debut poetry collection, Judas and Suicide, was a finalist for the New England Book Award, and their soon-to-follow second collection, Refused a Second Date, was selected as a finalist for a Maine Literary Award. Maya's most recently published third poetry collection, What's So Wrong with the Pity Party Anyway, was selected as one of 4 winners of Garden Party Collective's Chapbook Prize in 2024. Williams was one of 3 artists of color selected to represent Maine in the Kennedy Center's Arts Across America series in 2020, one of the Advocates Champions of Pride in 2022, and one of the Maine Humanity Council's recipients of the Constance Carlson Public Humanities Prize in 2024. This evening, Maya will read selections from What's So Wrong with the Pity Party Anyway, as well as poems from the previous collections, and then engage us all in Q&A and writing workshop exercises featuring generative writing prompts based on the poems shared. We will, without a doubt, be delighted by Maya's gift for looking at scenes and relationships from different perspectives, exploring the complexities of identity in connections and disconnections with others, and in grief. And the power of, to use Maya's metaphor, sharing ink. I give you Maya Williams.
Thank you for those beautiful introductions. Can in-person folks hear me okay? Beautiful. Can online folks hear me okay? We can get like a thumbs up or emoji or something of a response in the chat. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you all for making the time to be here tonight. I will be reading poems that contain content about mental health, suicide, familial grief, communal grief, grief in relationships, gun violence, religion, the shootings in Lewiston, Maine in 2023, and swearing, because that's how I like to express myself. Please take care of yourselves as needed. Please drink water. Please take a restroom break as needed. Please stretch. If folks have earbuds, because like tech noise can be very abrupt and distracting sometimes, use them. You're not going to hurt my feelings. And then also that should be the least of your concerns, quite honestly. With that being said, this is a new piece, hasn't been published anywhere. It's called A Conversation with Grief. Hello again, love. I'm trying to love and appreciate you better. How hard it is to love you when you remind me of the ways the living and the dead won't come back to me. These days, it's been harder for my nervous system remembering the living more than the dead. If you want me to use this mic instead, I can do that. Okay. I have come to accept the recent dead unable to return. I'm trying to hold on to one more grandmother while she's here, and I don't know if I'm doing a great job. I'm trying to ask loved ones for what I need because I can't rely on that one person anymore. My fingernails press into my palms to keep me present. My palms have multiple grins at my ineffectiveness. Telling people you made me a better writer helps me believe my trauma is not the teaching artist I need. I don't enjoy conversing with you all the time, but moments like these help me be more receptive when it happens again and again. I apologize for the times spiritual bypassing made me ignore you. I apologize for the David moments, me screaming into voids, unwilling to shout back. I'm always trying to love you better. It's hard not to blame you when illness, systems, substances, suicide, circumstance take my loved ones away. My best friend once compared a colonized heaven to a shitty retirement home. How long has heaven been weaponized by people weaponizing you? I wish you could control that narrative, but I know you can't. Life has been compared to plays, an extensive TV series. You're often a bystander in the writing process. I don't mean that as an insult, surprisingly. We have to be the ones to let you intervene. I know. I have to be the one to let you intervene. I know. The landing of anticipating you never lands well, but there is a landing spot for you in my chest every time. Death doesn't discriminate, but the living who force it upon marginalized people do. The living who force it upon my people do. What is a pilgrimage but for those who seek safe haven with their dead? That's the first piece. And this is a piece from my collection, What's So Wrong with a Pity Party Anyway? It's called How to Learn the Wrong Way to Grieve. Accompany your Grandma Reese, your aunt, your uncle, and your siblings to your Pa Rich's plot. Arrange the fake red flowers in a vase with the knowledge of how your grandmother will want to exchange them seasonally for brand new pink plastic flowers. While on your knees, about to pray for Pa Rich's release, don't argue with your grandmother as she forces you up by your elbow and drags you to her car. Let her shout, "Stop that. It won't bring him back." Let her finish her arrangements. Let Uncle Ricky and Aunt Karen continue to say nothing. Let all three of your siblings continue to say nothing. Let yourself dust the dirt from your knees. Learn to never do that again as you visit Pa Rich's grave every year. Don't let her know you already know he's not coming back. Don't let her know that all you wanted was to cry it out. Don't let her know that you wished everyone would cry with you. When you bring this to her attention, when you're old enough and brave enough to do so, and she widens her stare at you to say, "Oh, I don't even remember that," keep your tears in. This next poem is also new. I want this to be a productive conversation, but only if you'd let me. Why is yearning in tandem with grief? especially when the person is still alive. It's not true for me for a productive conversation to have all the answers I want. I ache for you when everyone else is present for me and you're not. You said we do not have the same perspective of what happened, so a conversation about the events of our arguments wouldn't be productive. As much as I don't want that to be true, I agree. Even though I'm hurting, I really hope you're not. Even though you're isolated, know that I am not. There's always an ache in missing you. I asked my therapist why I cried over you more than my granny, and she said it's because you always put my nervous system in distress. She said in times of grief, it's important to make space for calm for ourselves. When was the last time I had a calm thought about you? You said you hold no ill will towards me. I question if I am more capable of holding all the ill will. It took someone else's death to hear from you again. After 7 months of silence, my friend Brooke said, it seems unhealthy for me to wait for you to be good again. Will you ever be good again? Back to the What's So Wrong with a Pity Party Anyway collection. This piece is called Delivery Has Failed to Send. What a scam being alive is after losing so many people I thought I could hold on to. I haven't cried for Michael since 2018 after losing him in 2014. If I stopped crying for 6 out of the 10 years he's been gone, what does that say about my monstrous memory? What does that say for how long my brain can retain him before he slips away? I had this bad habit of messaging him after he was gone. I wanted him so badly to respond. It was the first time I ever experienced the denial part of grief for someone who died. The first time facts weren't enough proof for me. Are these lack of tears a new denial my body has formulated? Is my body marking all of missing him as spam? How much searching do I have to do to regulate the tears into my inbox again? Or do I have to search at all? God, I wish I had better metaphors. Who can speak in metaphors when my first kiss, my first fellow queer friend, my first fellow mentally ill friend is dead still? At least the tears were proof he was here. It still makes me upset I couldn't attend his funeral. I don't always say my dad tried his best, but that day he did. Travels couldn't work out, no gravesite visit yet. I have been revising the same poem about Michael since 2014. Doesn't that show he's still in every poem of mine, whether I like it or not? Yeah, go ahead, you can clap. I heard a clap and like then a hesitation. I'm like, no, go ahead. And speaking of that hesitation, if you're hesitating from snapping or going, ooh, or oomph, because your body naturally does that, don't hold that back. Please release that. I haven't had to say that to a crowd in a very long time, but I'm going to tell you, release that. It's okay. If you want to continue to sit and remain in silence, that is absolutely okay. Just know that that invitation is set for you. Online friends as well, if you're going like, woo, from your seat with your camera off, I love that for you. This next poem is also in the chapbook, and it talks about a loved one of mine who was a veteran who took his own life in 2021, and then talking about the murderer who took his own life in October 2023, and just trying to navigate both of those distinct timelines of these two very different people who share ultimately the same thing, but still wanting to make clear how very distinct these two people are. October 2021. A veteran cannot place his pain outside of himself. He uses a gun to make the pain stop. It doesn't work. His sons still wrestle with his pain. October 2023. A veteran cannot place his pain outside of himself. He uses a gun to inflict pain on others. Uses a gun to make the pain stop. It doesn't work. The damage was done. His son has to wrestle with so much pain. October 2023. I couldn't sleep for 3 days after the murderer's body was found. He chose to hurt so many people online and off before hurting himself. October 2021. We couldn't sleep for 3 days after his body was found. The only person he ever wanted to hurt was himself. I have been holding different words in my body for a little over a week now. Words are all I have, and I don't know if they're doing my mind justice. No one cares about mental health until there's a body count. October 2021. A man uses his training with a weapon to take his own life, gets an obituary with words like suddenly and unprepared. October 2023. A man uses his training with a weapon to take 19 lives, including his own, gets numerous headlines, Instagram stories, and tweets. This world refuses to buoy or build the infrastructure and hard work it takes to heal. Tragedy is an inconvenience. October 2021. We take a week off from work after he died. October 2023. Cities across the state of Maine closed their businesses and locked their apartment house doors before finding out the killer died. October 2021. I can empathize with someone struggling with grief and mental illness. October 2023. I cannot empathize with someone using their struggle to justify hurt. I cannot empathize with a murderer. I can only empathize with the son he left behind. Right from the scar, not from the wound, they say. How long until I want to rip the Band-Aid off? How long before another atrocity causes sadness, anger, and exhaustion to settle in? October 2023. The man at the press conference called it a mental health nexus. A friend's murder trial is the same week people have memorials for the murders in Lewiston. The same world is responsible for 2 different men taking their lives for different reasons. October 2023. I don't live in Lewiston. I only know so many loved ones there. So I'm affected too. I don't want to write this. October 2021. I don't want to write about how my father-in-law died. October 2023. I don't want a murderer to be the reason I start writing about my father-in-law again. October 2021. There are still guns in my in-laws' house, and it makes me furious. October 2023. Susan Collins still wants the presence of guns, and it makes me furious. Day after the news of the murderer's death, I walk to the post office. Large signs on the windows about firearms take up space in my eyes. How much longer they'll be up, I don't know. Same thing at Portland Jetport. Overhead announcement about firearms have always been there. It just feels different now. My chest tenses, then deflates in defeat. I don't want anyone dead by suicide, martyrs. October 2023. I can't give a poem about what happened that night because I wasn't there. I can only tell you about how late rehearsal was, how one actor didn't know what his drive home to Lewiston would be like, how the first person who texted me was my partner asking, "When are you coming home?" October 2021. I can't give a poem about what happened that morning because I wasn't there. I can only tell you about how I was eating a bowl of Cocoa Puffs when my partner's brother called him about their father, how all I heard were wails and no, 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 how when I tried to hold him, we both fell to the floor. I asked him what he needed. He said, "I need to go home." Deep breath. That's the end of that poem. Tonight, hopefully my partner is honest with me about how he has been feeling all day because of how he returned to work too soon and focused on other needs over his own, and how when he's proud of himself for opening up, I'm upset with him for not opening up sooner in order to prevent anything worse, and how it's one, if not both of us, who proclaim exhaustion to hold off communication for the evening. Hopefully, I do the same. Hopefully, my partner is honest with me about whether or not intimacy is helping because of the mix of yearning and emptiness in his kissing, and how he punches his pillow at night, and how holding each other as we cry is the closest to intimacy now. Hopefully, I do the same. Earlier today, I had to swerve into a gas station parking lot to get him to stop apologizing for asking too much. Your father just died. I need you to tell me what you need. Hopefully, I tell him what I need too. This next poem is from Judas and Suicide, and it's compartmentalized in shorter stanzas on various pieces, but I'm going to read them all at once. And it's called If You Stop Crying, It Won't Hurt As Much. It is another Saturday night when Pour Me a Shot of Whiskey plays on my grandmother's stereo as she, my mother, my aunt, my uncle, and my play cousins are drinking in the dining room. 8-year-old me runs to the dining room crying from another headache. My aunt rushes me to the shower and runs out for Advil to help me feel better. My aunt is the first to teach me that the more I cried, the more it would hurt. It is summer vacation, and it is time to move boxes out of our blue house in Charlotte and into a white U-Haul for a red brick house in Greensboro. 15-year-old me feels the sweat and heavy breath hold my body captive. I continue to rush as I lift, walk, drop, repeat with as much helpful precision as I can, despite the tears constantly dripping down my face. My stepdad and my mother laugh at me. They tell me that if I stopped crying, my body wouldn't hurt as much. It is early fall, and 19-year-old me and my boyfriend sit on my long, thin dorm bed. My poster of a rainbow-painted bird has better eye contact with him than I do. My boyfriend tells me to stop being manipulative with my tears. I try to stop crying. I try to stop crying so his words won't hurt as much. I know, men, right? It is another Monday night when my computer screen glows with my therapist giving me eye contact through her red rectangular glasses. 25-year-old me uncrosses their legs and faces her. My therapist reminds me how I need to let her know what's coming up for me, to name my needs. The tears make my eyes fucking hurt. My chest feels lifted. Thank you. This next poem is from Refused a Second Date, and it's the poem you referenced to. Yes. It's called Good Ink. How has no one caught on yet that if I'm sharing with you a clean draft of something I've written, I'm flirting with you? When I message you through Bumble or text about coming to Bolfini's on a Tuesday night to read poems, that means I want to make out with you right after you've seen how talented and bubbly I am. The last time we shared ink, I thought of how I shared with you my best fiction at the time. It wasn't enough for you. I thought of how you held me after reading you a poem about being with you, and it wasn't enough for you to write affection back to me. The last time we shared ink, I thought of how my ex before you said, "Good luck finding someone who will put up with you." How someone after you said, "I don't deserve you." The last time we shared ink, I thought of who else would be worthy enough to soak it up, become a sponge within my page without trying to rinse it out. My partner now still has the card I wrote him for his birthday a week after we met. I still have every letter he's written for each of mine. I hope you find someone you feel safe enough to share your ink with after they give you their own. I hope you finally invest in that second notebook we once talked about. I hope you put in the time to make the first one full before you do. Thank you. We got 2 more poems left. This poem is for my granny. She passed away August 31st of 2024, and I dream about her all the time. And this poem was written 2 years before her death. None of us planned this. It's called Moosh. I don't write about my maternal grandmother as much as I would like. Granny calls me Moo Moo or Moosh when she feels more loose, more light in her day. Whether the latter is a play on Mushu with all the times we watch Mulan on repeat or not, I'll never know. I don't think I'm supposed to. Endearment is an underappreciated mystery. Before my nephew was born, I wanted to be called Auntie Moosh. It didn't stick. Just Auntie will do. There's a song in every voicemail Granny leaves for me in, "Hey Moosh, just called to say I love you. Talk to you later. Love you more." Growing up involved Granny and me in screaming matches over who loved each other more to infinity and back. One night when I was 12, we competed for 15 minutes, our throats joyfully hoarse. Moosh is the most gender-neutral nickname I have among the others from women in my family. There's a reason I spell auntie the way I do. The last poem I wrote about Granny was about her use of hot combs. I remember my mother told me she wished the poem had kept going. I was sad at first Auntie Moosh didn't stick because I thought it would be a way to keep Granny's spirit going after she is gone. I know Granny loves me not only because of Moosh, love you keeps it loose and light in the best way possible. Thank you, Keegan. Apologize for not naming this in advance. Give it up for Jacqueline Benita Bob, everybody. This is the poem you've all been waiting for. What's so wrong with a pity party anyway? We can discuss the nuance of privilege and circumstance later. Right now, I want purple streamers and glitter scattered on the floor at my pity party. I want the perfect beanbag chairs for me and my guests. I want my guests to have an in-person and Zoom option. I want people to live tweet my pity party so the public can tune in. I want my pity party to be a cozy 3 hours. I want folks to know they can leave as early as desired. I want a sober punch bowl and a spiked punch bowl appropriately labeled. I want all the best flavored and styled Cheetos. I want all the Oreos. Disclaimer, I wrote this before I realized they gave money to Israel, but I will keep reading the line as it was written. Forgive me. I want all the Oreos because they're kosher, vegan, gluten-free, halal, and gay-friendly. I want Oreos for everyone at my pity party. I don't know about you, but I'll be wearing my teal dress I call Old Faithful with black sweatpants underneath. I want to see a full range of red carpet looks from animal jumper PJs to diamond-studded gowns at my pity party. I want people to dress up however they want at my pity party. I want a good ass playlist with every song using the phrase pity party. So we can boo to it, sing along to it, see how often one can do the Macarena to it. I want there to be plenty of wailing and screaming. I want there to be a comfy room for anyone with sensory overload from the wailing and screaming. I want 15 therapists properly compensated to staff my pity party. That gets a laugh every time. I want to know why. And their own therapist can come along too. I want the open space for me to cry and make out with my partner, now fiance, after a long day of us both being peopled out. I want my pity party to be accessible as fuck, because we all have something to express pity about. We all have something to grieve about. There are days I'm sure we won't want the pity party to end. And those are the poems. Thank you. There's going to be a microphone coming around for folks who may have questions about poems read, about writing in general, about the Poet Laureate program in Portland, anything about poetry you may want to ask, anything about grief you may want to ask. And this goes for online friends as well. If you have questions, let a moderator know.
Yeah. So when you're writing, who, if anyone, do you imagine you're writing for?
For me?
Who is the writing to? Yeah.
Me. Yeah.
For you?
Yeah, the writing's for me.
Mm.
Writing's for me, and the writing's for my loved ones. The writing is for people that I want to have insight about me. Yeah, writing's for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Gotta be other questions.
So I was wondering if you talk a little bit about maybe the cathartic process of writing, what that looks like. I know that there's a number of social work students actually online tonight. And
You're so needed. So happy you tuned in.
absolutely. And that's something we talk about a lot, how you can use the medium of writing, for example, when you're working with people.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to name an important disclaimer. Writing is therapeutic. It is not therapy. Therapy is therapy. I cannot guarantee that writing will save your life. All I can guarantee is that it's been helpful for me to express myself. And whenever I can see other people utilizing it to express themselves, that's fantastic. In my work with my therapist, every time I'm having difficulty saying something, my therapist is like, let's sit with it for a moment and write it down. And sometimes I get annoyed, but then other times I'm like, I know I'm paying her to do this to me. She knows how to get something out of me so we can do the work we need to do, and that's to write. And it varies from poem to poem. I prefer to make sure that I've processed it enough in therapy or with my loved ones before I put it on the page, before I spend time revising it, before I decide whether or not I want to submit it for publication. That's just my process. Everyone's process is super different, but that's how I like to engage in poems for sure. So thank you for that.
This is a question in the chat from Allie. How do you narrow a topic down to write about? How do you find your starting points?
This is such a good question. Thank you, Allie. Oh my gosh, every process varies. My most recent chapbook, What's So Wrong with a Pity Party Anyway, it used to be a 90-page thesis all about grief. And then it became, over 2 years later, it becomes this 35-page chapbook, which is just a smaller collection of poems. With my first book, Judas and Suicide, it used to be a manuscript that was 45 pages. And then by the time it got published in 2023, it was 80 pages. And for me, I wanted to choose a topic that was resonating well for me at the time. And I feel like grief has always been an overarching thing in my work. And it's just a matter of like how I talk about grief. Because oftentimes creatives talk about like, oh, you're writing about the same thing over and over again. It's like, yeah, I sure hope so. This is what the rest of my life looks like. My first book was about grief in a way that talked about religious-related trauma and suicidality. My second book was about grief as far as talking about mental illness and dating. And then this recent chapbook talks, it's more of a larger conversation about grief. How do we find joy in the midst of grief? Where does grief come from? what does it mean when helping yourself in grief versus having to support a loved one in their own grief and how you're grieving too. And so, yeah. And Allie, if you have any follow-ups to that, feel free to type them in the chat in case I'm missing anything. Thank you so much.
Ask a question. Oh, sorry.
We got one in the back.
Do you feel as though when you perform poetry, it takes on a life of its own? Does it become something besides what you intended it for, or does it always generate the same kind of feeling with your audience? Do you feel like it always resonates the same way?
This is such a good question. I feel like there are some poems where I perform them the same way each time, and then there are some poems where I perform them differently each time. There are some poems where I feel like this is the message that I wanted to put into it, and then I get really curious and excited whenever I read to audiences, and the audiences are like, "Me too," or they're like, "This is how I interpreted it," and I'm like, "I did not think of that, and thank you. Now I will think of that." For example, there's a poem I didn't read tonight, but it's a very old poem that's often requested of me called "To the Black and Brown Femmes with Earbuds in Their Ears," and it's to Black and Brown people of marginalized genders who walk up and down Congress Street in Portland. And when I originally wrote it, it was just about like, yeah, having earbuds in your ears, just listening to music, calming down. And then in more recent years, as I keep reading it, it makes me very happy that my neurodivergent and autistic loved ones are like, "I feel seen with the earbuds." And that's exciting. So.
I'll follow up on that one. What difference, can you talk a little bit about the difference an audience makes? I know we've been a pretty polite crowd, but, but.
Every crowd's different. I love it.
Yeah.
What was your question? Because you said you were going to ask something.
The other question was in terms of, and this is kind of related to, we had a little brief conversation at dinner about creative nonfiction, but one of the things we talk about is when you're writing about other people, and the ethics of writing about other people, and when you share what you've written that involve other people with them. I don't know if you can talk a little bit about that with the other people who populate some of your
Yeah, I would love to talk about that. I did talk to my fiance before these poems were published. I always want, when it comes to writing poems about those closest to me, I do like to ask their consent. And then when it comes to folks who are no longer in my life anymore, I just don't use their names, or I don't defer to them specifically or reveal them in a way that would be very, very obvious, especially in like certain small communities. But again, when it comes to those closest to me, I do believe that consent is important in all realms when it comes to writing. I do not want to come across as you can nitpick what type of forms of consent you want. No, that's not the takeaway here. What I am saying is that whenever it comes to a loved one deciding to spend the rest of their life with an artist, especially an artist who's like a public figure, like having to navigate like I love this person and this person uses art to express themselves, and at the same time I didn't sign up for a public life, so, and having to have that conversation is really important. So
Okay, Allie has a follow-up question.
yay,
And there's 2 other questions in the chat for you after that.
beautiful.
So has there been any particular topic that you find harder to write about than others?
Ooh, that's a good question. I feel like I tend to have a more the reason why I appreciate my second book, Refuse a Second Date, is because that pushed me in regards to writing about sex more. I feel like I want to work more at writing about that, especially as it intersects with religious related trauma and grief. I feel like that's a topic that's really hard for me to write about. And that's not to say that writing about suicidality and grief is easy. It's just that I've become more and more familiar with it with enough practice. Just because I choose to talk about those things, that doesn't mean everybody is obligated to talk about those things.
Thank you. From Diane, from your first poem, you had the line, "My trauma is not the teaching artist I need." Can you talk a little about this? And can trauma and grief be a good teacher, or what do you need to do to make it a good teacher?
I love this question so
Oh,
much.
these are such great questions.
Oh my goodness. Because growing up in Christian community, especially as someone who still continues to identify with Christianity, my biggest pet peeve from being raised in that community is hearing the narrative of God will use your trauma for good. God made you suffer so you can share this story with the world and share his glory. And I hate that because I don't believe in a God who wanted me to suffer. What a concept. I do not believe in that. So when it comes to active hurt, I don't believe any of us were supposed to go through that. But at the same time, I do believe we were all meant to go through grief. It's just a matter of having those conversations about when trauma intersects with grief, how do we take care of ourselves versus like the grief when it comes to deaths that end up being expected, or what Caitlin Doty refers to as the good death when it comes to someone dying of natural causes. Especially as this world gets harder and harder to live in. Not as many people dying of natural causes anymore, whether it be to injustices in the medical system, injustices from law enforcement, so many injustices to the point where people choose to take their own lives. That's a heavy one for me. Just making sure to actively distinguish between the two while also recognizing how they intersect, but wanting to make clear that trauma and grief are not the same thing. And that's why I believe grief has been a really good teacher to me, whereas my trauma has not. I could have lived a much better life without it. And at the same time, I'm grateful for the life that I have. I'm grateful for the community that I surround myself by, and that's really wonderful. But I will not thank my higher power for things I was not meant to go through.
Okay, so transitioning, there's a question from Jen. Have you saved any of your childhood poetry pieces and continued on from those as an adult?
Ooh, I have saved a lot of my childhood work. No, I have not touched them. Because on one end, it's so cringe in my body reading old work from my childhood. And at the same time, it's like, oh, this child, I have to be kinder to this child because this child is why I'm still here. This child is why I'm pushing 30 right now. And I have to be kind to this child amidst their cringe. It's like, thank you for keeping me here. I won't edit your stuff. This is a time capsule for you for what I needed back then. And thank you. I think we have time for a couple more questions before getting into some writing.
Something we didn't get to answer at dinner. What's the stimulus for your writing? Where do you think it flows from?
Yeah, I feel like the stimulus varies. I feel like the stimulus comes from my faith journey. The stimulus comes from my grief. Stimulus comes from the loved ones I surround myself by. Stimulus comes from my infant and toddler aged nibblings. For folks who may not know, nibblings is a gender neutral alternative to nieces and nephews. Feel like a stimulus that I have often is like being alive in a burning world and choosing that every day. The stimulus of entertainment media and books that I love and poets that I really, really love, art that I love. I get really excited about what another friend is working on and I'm like, ooh, say more, and stuff like that. So a variety of stimuli for sure. Thank you. Oh, we got a question here.
I really loved all the poems. Thank you so much for coming. I'm always, and I want to ask about the poems, but I also, if this is going to be the last question, I have to ask it. I'm sort of fascinated with the routines that writers have.
Yeah.
Just the like daily routines, you know, the most mundane routines. I wondered if you'd share some of that process of writing, what it looks like for you, if it's a routine, and yeah, what the shape of that is for, also thinking about the writers in the room.
Yeah, I feel like my routine shifts a lot because my schedule shifts a lot. I do run a Sunday morning writing workshop at Novel in Portland, Maine, and it's also on Zoom for folks who'd rather attend online or for transportation reasons can only attend online. I run an open mic series on Tuesday nights. That's in person at the Equality Community Center in Portland, as well as, again, online. I'm a huge fan of hybrid spaces. So thank you again for making this hybrid space available. I'm a fan. So there's that routine as far as how do I make sure I continue to delve into artistic community and grow as a writer and like grow with fellow writers and artists in the community. But as far as my individual writing practice, that shifts so much. Sometimes I put in my Google Calendar, like, did you write today? Sometimes I'm like, oh, look at that. I'm done with emails. I'm done with calls. I'm done with rehearsal. I can write right now. And I'm at capacity to. Or there are some weeks where some folks are like, how's your writing been? I'm like, oh, it's been great. But then I remind myself about, oh, I only wrote grant applications and emails and teaching outlines. So no, actually my writing is not where I want it to be, but it will be. Like, so it definitely ranges from week to week for sure. Routine is actively changing. Thank you. You might not be the final question. Any other questions before we get into some writing?
I told Allie I would ask this question if you were taking any more questions. So what works that you've read have been the most transformative for you?
Ooh, I love this question. Anis Mojgani's In the Pockets of Small Gods. He is a Black Iranian Baha'i poet. He writes so beautifully about grieving those who are alive and dead in that collection. He used to be the statewide poet laureate of the state of Oregon. I was only poet laureate of a city. He was poet laureate of a state. I can't even begin to imagine that. Kaveh Akbar is an incredible poet who wrote a novel that came out last year called Martyr. And I read that book twice and it made me sob like a baby every time. And I love how moving that novel is when it comes to talking about staying alive and like talking about earth martyrs rather than like the usual sacrificial definitions of like martyrs that are often connected to religion, that I really appreciated. Another book that I really loved, a young adult book by Marcus Zusak called I Am the Messenger. It's one of my favorite books of all time, especially when it comes to community. And it's really a love letter to folks who stay in their community their whole lives. And one of my favorite lines out of the whole book is where he says, like, because his mom is all like, your dad was supposed to help me move out of this city forever ago, and we're stuck here. And then he goes, and she was like, so I thought you'd move out of here at some point. And he was like, it's not the place, Mom, it's the people. So if I decide to leave, I need to make myself better first. And that's just so beautiful. And I could go on and on about favorite books of mine. So I will stick to those 3 for now. Thank you all so much. Are you ready for some writing? Yay! Beautiful. There are 3 different options for your writing that are inspired by the poems that were read tonight. I'll set a timer for 20 minutes, and then we'll come back for some optional sharing, and I'll say what that looks like. And yes, they'll be on the, thank you, give it up for Keegan, everybody. Woo! Thank you so much. So these 3 writing prompt options, who taught you how to grieve is one option. What's a phrase you've heard over and over again that you just want gone, disappeared, we don't need it anymore, dump it in the trash. Final prompt, And I love this prompt especially because different age groups respond in very different ways. It's a lovely intergenerational prompt. I love, what's at your pity party? What's at your grief cried-filled pity party? And I will set a timer for 20 minutes. And then I'll explain more about what optional sharing looks like and the different options for that too. I'll let you know when the timer starts. Timer starts now. Happy writing. finish that last good word, last good letter, last good phrase, good sentence, good punctuation mark. If you'd like to come back to it another time outside of this space, you totally can. In the meantime, here are some options on how to share. This goes for online friends who may want to copy and paste in the chat and have someone read aloud for you there, or in-person friends who want to share out loud. You can share the entirety of what you've written. You can share an excerpt if you don't want to share the whole thing. You can share what impacted you while writing it, what your process was like, what your creative thinking process was like, if you don't want to share the piece itself. You have in-person friends have the privilege of having peers to choose from to read. I'm not sure if that's a similar case for online friends. There we go. I got a nod from Beverly. Yes, that's possible. Thank you. Otherwise, if there's another way folks want to share, please ask for it. Otherwise, you don't have to share at all. That's why this is optional. This is an invitation, not an obligation. Yes. Woo!
Hard, shaming looks from my cousin taught me how to grieve. When I went to my first funeral at 5 and cartwheeled in the graveyard, too young to understand loss. My teacher of grief was a white knuckle cry in the dark, too heavy to hold in when there were no more hands to hold. It was the indifferent pulse of a man-made brook, babbling like madmen at the family reunion I spent alone. I taught myself grief in the mirror with clippers, like Britney Spears, so that I didn't have to accept powerlessness. I learned how to truly grieve when you held me, and I didn't have to ask.
Thank you so much. I understand different sacred places have different rules and stuff. And I'd love to see more children cartwheeling in the graveyard, but that's just me.
We have someone in the chat who would like to unmute herself. And sorry, we have someone on Zoom who would like to unmute herself and read.
Yay!
Go ahead.
Mine's a little bit longer, but I can remember when I heard that some friends of mine had died. I hadn't known them long, but in my small world that kept constantly shifting, they had meant so much to me. I left my sixth grade school with promises to keep in touch no matter the distance. Exchanging numbers seemed to be the way to go, but the first time I found a phone I could use for it, my query of if they were there was met with immediate sobs. A rough question for a grieving mother to hear. There wouldn't be the late night chants we had talked about. There was no number for where they were now. I stood there with the receiver to my ear, quietly bearing witness to an anguish I couldn't understand at the tender age of 12. The mother tearfully told me that not only her daughter, but also the other two of our little foursome had tragically been claimed by the gun violence of a drive-by. They had been at the corner store we always went to after school before making our way to one another's house. I felt my chest cave in slightly as the realization hit me that if I hadn't moved, I would have been with them. I didn't know how to apologize to the mother for having not been there, for still being alive and making this call that would drag it all forward for her again. I didn't know how to release the weight that now existed in my chest. I didn't know how to not be afraid of making new friends. I didn't want to replace them like that. I also didn't want to lose someone else I had just met. After hanging up, I cried until it felt as if my soul had leaked from my eyes. I was a husk for days. It got better over the following weeks, but I never quite shook the thoughts that I should have been with them. That's it. Sorry.
Thank you so much, Allie. What? No, don't apologize. Do not apologize. That was beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. Also, shout out to our closed captions writer. Thank you so much for keeping track of all of us.
The infinite expanse so wounded my child heart that I cried for the people not yet destined to be born for another 100 million years. When I learned that my heart was not allowed to rest, I begged for you to let it. When Nana passed, though, I couldn't express my remorse. You bawled for weeks, but I sat stone-like and distant. She was gone, but she stayed with me. When Mima passed, you were indignant. For the first time, though, I cried. In chorus, the song we sung delivered her soul beyond the cosmos, and the weight of each note crushed me. She was flawed, and she left wounds with her departure. I loved her, though you did not. We attended her funeral, but the wounds clearly could never close.
Thank you so much.
Anyone else? Or anyone on Zoom?
Yeah, there's no pressure to share. Your presence is enough. Your attentive listening is enough. Thank you so, so much for being here. Thank you all so much for being here. And with that being said, is there any other closers folks would like to do for the folks who primarily organize this? I just showed up. That's all I had to do. Thank you all for organizing this.
You can read mine, although I'm not a poet, so anyway, in shape or form, but
You
because
you
Alex was just telling me at dinner repeatedly that I had to write.
You said you're not a poet, and yet here you are reading a poem. I'm not gonna dictate how you identify, but I will say
Yes.
I'm excited.
And I did teach a class where I had to tell a student that no more disclaimers, and I just did one, so I apologize for that. So now I apologize for you.
Together.
All right. So I did the pity party one. So people with generous ears, hearing and listening ears, reciprocal ears, non-judgmental ears for voices melodic and not morose, voices in call and response, in rhythm like a blues lyric, affirmation from repeated refrain, holy call and response, holler and hymn from the sinners and the devout, not saints, Saturday night and Sunday morning, for the voice in my head that struggles for right words, for the heads with too many words, for silence and solace, replenish and repast, and dancing, let there be dancing.
Let there be dancing. Thank you so much. Again, not to put words in your mouth. That was poetic.
Well, thank you.
You're so welcome. I'm not going to call you anything you don't want to be called. Just know that it sounded poetic. Any other last minute sharers, whether online or in person? Oh, we got a hand in the back. Look at that. You motivated someone. Look at that.
Well, nobody did the phrase, so I kind of felt it was left out. Yeah, I usually just get books for people. I don't write anything. So I did the phrase you've heard over and over.
There we go.
Gifted, gifted, gifted. You didn't gift anything. You gave something, or you give something. Gift is a noun. Give is the proper verb to use. You don't sound smarter or more clever by using the word gift as a verb. Gift is a noun, a place, a person, a place, a thing, a person. I don't think you can give a person. You definitely cannot gift a person. Don't try to make it acceptable by adding re to re-gift. You gave it again.
This human had a stance and had to make it known. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you for the gift, Alan.
Anyone else who feels motivated to share, whether online or in person? Exactly, yeah.
So I also picked the phrase I've heard over and over, I want gone. And what I wrote, while I didn't have anything super poetic, I
You don't know
will
that. You don't know that.
I will
I didn't
say
hear it.
that the phrase "just get over it."
Mm.
I'm tired of hearing that.
Yeah.
I'm tired of hearing that people just saying, just get over it, just get over it. Grief is different for everybody.
Mm.
And I guess I related it to grief, but it comes in waves. It's not linear. It comes when you least expect it, knocking you down, just like when you're in the ocean and you're standing there enjoying the ocean, the way it looks, and then just having it knock you right down. And it can be the smallest of things that remind you of what you're struggling with. So just get over it. You don't have to. It's okay to grieve, and it's okay to deal with those things in your own way. God made us all different for this reason.
Thank you so much. It was well said. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other takers?
I'll share something. I
like,
just wanted to let you know that I was going to share something. And I know that I did a lot of sharing in the first 30 minutes of this presentation, which is why when it comes to workshops like these, I usually don't share because I've already shared already, or I facilitate other workshops where majority of people are sharing, and then I'll share. But one phrase I can't stand hearing is, and I understand if this is some people's lived experience with it, I have empathy for it. And when I hear it for me, when folks say things like, oh, you don't want to make money off your art, then you wouldn't love it anymore. Like, excuse me? You mean to tell me I don't deserve resources for doing what I love? I'm sorry, what? And thank you to Umpy for giving me resources so I could do what I love with all of you. Thank you very much. Thank you for being one of the reasons why I'm able to do this full time. Thank you all so much.
And before we close, we have something for you.
Oh. It's so pretty. Thank you. Aw. Should I open it? I'm gonna open it. It's so pretty. It's beautiful. Oh my gosh. Northern Maine with Paul Sear. Thank you very much. Oh my gosh. Seedless raspberry jam. Thank you. My fiance is going to be so excited. Oh my gosh, I one time did a workshop with the Girl Scouts, with a Girl Scouts chapter in Maine. And yes, I did get Thin Mint cookies. It made me so happy. Oh, what? Again, my fiance and I, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, it's gorgeous. Thank you. And thank you all for having me. Thank you for sharing your beautiful pieces. Thank you, online friends, for sticking around and sharing your beautiful pieces and questions. Please rest well and stay safe. Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much, Maya.